Hey guys, my name is Mike, and on chess.com I'm known as Shachmati523. And you can see that my rapid rating is a little bit under 1500 at the moment. And I've been playing chess in my adult life, for maybe the last 3 or 4 years. Played a lot as a kid, just basically learned the rules and so forth, and thought I was pretty good, but of course that's what most kids think when their parents tell them that they're good. Um, and then picked it up probably 3 or 4 years ago again and been studying hard and watching lots of videos and training quite a bit. And so I've decided to start this YouTube channel where I'm doing a rapid run to 2000. Now, I'm only around 1500. Kind of been in a slump lately, normally up above 1500 somewhere. But I thought it would be good to make some videos in my rapid games. There's tons of chess content out there these days, most of them from masters or grandmasters, international masters, etc. Lots of great content to learn from, etc. However, there's not a lot on chess improvement. There is some, but it seems to be one of those topics that's kind of a mystery. How do you go about doing it? And I can't say that I've got it completely figured out. I've got a lot of ideas about it. And it's one thing to have ideas, it's another thing to actually do it. So, with that, I'm going to go ahead and start a game with a 15 plus 10 time control. And first, I should say that I'm shooting for 2000 ultimately. It's probably going to take a couple of years if I ever even get there. But on chess.com. So that's the context in which the rating, the 2000 rating, would be in. And because I play on Lee Chess as well, and I quickly got my rating up to 1900 and above over there. So I don't think that would be very far to go or all that instructive if I were to do it on Lee Chess. Because chess.com is notoriously more difficult, more challenging. Okay, so what do we have here? We've got a standard Sicilian, and in my repertoire, I've been playing the dragon for the most part. This person has played h3, so it's a little bit offbeat. Normally expect to see d4 in this position, but that's not what we're seeing here. So I'm trying to think how to best respond. Apparently, he wants to prevent this pin, so they're being maybe a little bit overly cautious. So I think I'm just going to proceed with the dragon plans and play g6 here to get my dark squared bishop fianchetto. And we'll see what they're up to next. So a little bit more while they're thinking. One of the ideas behind these videos is going to be to make sure that I analyze each game afterwards, and you can see what at least the computer thinks my strong points are and my weak points, and where I've missed some tactic or missed a win or something like that. And so we'll analyze these games. Okay, so now this move with the bishop to c4 is a little bit suspect because it's easy to stop, at least in the Sicilian. So probably, I mean, one of the best things to do is just to blunt the bishop by going to e6. However, in this particular case, I think I'm going to just take advantage of the ability to develop and bring my knight out to c6. Now, white's getting pretty good development, it seems like. However, here again, momentarily, that bishop is probably going to be nearly useless And my bishop is being prevented really from. I I have to get used to drawing arrows. Uh, from really developing out this direction up that diagonal. So um, I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and close it in with e6 here, blunting that bishop again, and eventually probably preparing d5, which I've noticed is good to just get that bishop off your back generally. Now in the dragon, the g8 knight normally comes out to f6, but I've noticed it's often more convenient to bring it here to e7 because that way it supports the pawn push right here. So that's one of the decisions I'm trying to think about now. One idea again is to begin launching an attack on this bishop, or at least getting it to back away. But I don't want to actually attack it too much from the flank. But I do kind of want to give it no escape squares to come towards me or to pin that knight on c6. So I often play a6 there. Now, one of the things that I'm noticing right off the bat is it's taking me a while to get castled, and that often happens in any kind of Sicilian for black. White seems to get castled quickly, and it can take a while for black to get castled. So that's one of the things I'm sort of conscious of while I'm playing. It's trying to develop maybe some ways to get castled a bit more quickly, even while I'm playing the Sicilian. I wanted to mention one more thing, and that is that just recently I actually started training with a coach, and so I've been drilling specific openings, working towards specific types of middle games. And so I'm going to be playing that repertoire for the most part. And over time, it'll become clearer exactly what it is. But basically, with the black pieces, for the most part, I'm playing a dragon Sicilian for against e4. And then I'll be playing against d4, I'll be playing King's Indian. And for those of you who may not be King's Indian players, you'd be amazed at how much there is to that. Just what a rich, deep opening it is. And it seems to be somewhat controversial in some of the most difficult lines how well black can actually do, like the Fianchetto version variation, for example, and some others. But that doesn't stop most people from playing it, and one of the attractions is you can get some very sharp lines, tactical lines that can lead to an advantage. Now, so here I'm debating about whether I bring my knight out to f6 or do I bring my knight over to e7 to support this push. Now, one question is, do I need anything to support that push? So a good method here is just to count the attackers and the defenders. So he's got 1, 2, 3 defenders of this d5 square. And at the moment, I will only have 1, 2. So I'm certainly not ready to push that just yet. So one of the nice things bringing that knight to e7 does is it leaves this diagonal open for your dark square bishop. So for better or worse, I'm going to go with that. Now, one of the things I noticed actually since I started with my coach is I seem to be a little bit in a slump. And whether that started before I started working with my coach or after, I'm not entirely certain. It might have been, I don't really recall, but it might have been some of my motivation to actually get a coach. However, some of it seems to have happened after getting my coach. Now, here essentially, I've got him outnumbered, but I'm going to go ahead and move forward with this castle. One of the things I'm thinking he wants to do is come here to g5. They often do that in these structures to try to eliminate the influence of the knight here on e7. So anyway, one of the questions that I'm realizing that I don't ask myself enough while I'm playing is, well, one way to put it is, what does my opponent want to do? But maybe even a better way of putting it that I just thought of recently is, after I make a particular move, what's my opponent's best response or even most likely response? And I've noticed if I ask that question, that it seems to yield some benefits. Now, how do I need to get this bishop off my back? This is the pin here. I would say yes, because I'd really like to break in the center. Now, one option would be playing f6, but that blocks in my bishop. That diagonal there. It blocks my bishop's diagonal. So I think although I don't necessarily like playing this move that much, it's a very common move, and I think it's useful in this case. So I'll play h6. So what is my opponent's best response here? Which they can move back to h4, and then I'll have the option of pushing this pawn forward and then getting that bishop to move back to g3. That's one way of doing it. I could also, oh yeah, so that's the move that I got. I could also push this pawn, which would break this pin essentially on my queen. But that's very weakening. Now this move here I also consider weakening to some extent, especially since once the bishop moves back here, it's going to have this diagonal. However, at that very moment in time, I'm going to be pushing my pawn. So I think I'm going to go ahead and push that bishop back. So again, once I push d5, this bishop is probably going to come all the way back here to a2. But that'll be after it takes, and then basically my knight and my queen are going to be supporting d5 versus his knight and bishop. So he's not going to want to take in that case, which is why he's going to back that bishop out of there. Now, since he's thinking for a while, that makes me think he's thinking about a sacrifice. So this is a common idea that they might sacrifice with the knight in order to try to keep this pin. Because, and ultimately this comes back to, does he want to let me break on d5? And by the fact that he's thinking about it for so long, okay, so this is interesting in itself. He did sacrifice, but he didn't sacrifice the knight. He actually sacrificed the bishop. Now, I think that he believes he's going to get an attack after I take back. So the move I'm expecting is queen to h5. Now, what do I do about that? I've got to change my plans because this whole plan is no longer under consideration because this is a vital threat to my king. Now, once he moves there, what defensive moves would I have? The ultimate square where that queen is coming is h7, and I don't really have any direct defense against that. So I'm thinking that what do I do here? Now, one of the things I could do would be to go ahead and just push this pawn forward. That way, when the queen comes there, I can just take that guy off. That weakens, blocks this diagonal. However, it's certainly better than the queen being allowed to come in and threaten me. But if I do push that, then this square becomes weak, and that pawn is hanging because I've only got one defender. So I don't really like that. Seems like I might have to use my bishop now to defend against this knight. Now that opens my king. However, I've got this knight to come here to close things off a bit. And so as long as I deal effectively with this knight without allowing this square to become weak on e6, then I'm probably okay. So the question is, does it make a difference if I go here or if I go here? I don't think that it does effectively. And just one last check to see if I have any other way of actually defending here. I don't see anything else I can do. I mean, I can move this guy out of the way. The other thing is I can just kind of ignore it, and I can move my rook over, and then I've got an escape square. However, then f7 becomes extremely weak, and potential mating attack could happen there. Very interesting. I think I just have to bite the bullet here and go ahead and attack that knight. And I don't think it matters which way I go. But the plan is to just take the knight out because the queen by itself can't really hurt me. And so, again, now, is there anything else I could do? I could bring my king here, and that kind of protects everything. And doesn't look that bad, actually, to bring my king here to g7. Can't take. He can't approach me in any way. And also, he can't mate me on f7. So rather than just taking, he doesn't have any other, he's got no dark squared bishop. So I think I'm going to do that. And that will protect over here. And then that's actually going to allow me to open up this diagonal so that I'll have a double attack on that knight. Okay, so he's now bringing in his reinforcements. But what I want to do is I want to go ahead and block by bringing my knight to g6. This is not necessarily an attack. However, it does threaten his knight because it's double attacked basically. And then his attack is basically fizzling out at this point. Now, where is that rook destined? It seems like it's coming over here to g3. And then I'll have to, if that happens, then I'll have to decide what I do. One possibility that I'm considering is coming up this direction. However, again, that weakens the e6 square. So I'm beginning to think that, basically he just doesn't have much of an attack if I don't start liquidating. So if I take here and then he takes back with the rook, then he can cause me some issues with the queen. However, I can bring my rook over at that point, and he can't mate me here because all I got to do is take back. So I actually don't really mind. I think that's not such a bad idea. The other thing is that it would be nice to get a little bit of counterplay. So I'm just not quite sure that it benefits me a whole lot to just try to get rid of the attack, because I don't think he actually has any immediate attack. He'd have to bring in some more pieces. So, having said that, I am going for this move here to threaten that bishop so that it can no longer even potentially have any influence on what's happening over here on my king side. And get a little bit closer to actually getting some counterplay and getting him off of my back. And he's got to be careful about his queen, because the way he's bringing in his pieces, beginning to limit his mobility. I mean, right now his only escape squares would be along this diagonal. Now, one of the things I've been thinking about is if he sacrifices a piece here, well, I've always got this bishop back here, and I've always got this pawn. But I would say right now that what's holding my position together is this pawn on f7. If that weren't there, I'd really be a goner. However, it's holding things together pretty nicely. And I must admit, this is the first time I've actually commentated a game as I play it. Hopefully I'll get used to this just a little bit more. Yeah, okay, so there's a sacrifice. And now I'm sure he really is wanting me to take with that pawn, but I'm not about to do that. We're going to take here with the bishop, and I bet, actually, hold on a second. So what he's wanting me to do actually is to take here, take this bishop. He's going to want to sacrifice here. And then if I were to take back, oh, then he would okay, but I've got my knight protecting this square. So my knight is actually saving things at the moment. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and take back. And he may go ahead and sacrifice that bishop, but it's not going to do him much good. I mean, he might sacrifice his knight for my bishop on e6. Anyway, so what I'm noticing is that it's taking me a lot longer to make my moves. I'm normally not down this low on time, especially with the 15 plus 10. But if I do happen to get low on time, what I'll do is just maybe stop talking quite as much and or explaining as much and just play. Normally, when there's a 10-second increment, it's pretty easy to ensure that you've got enough time to play the position. Now, one of the things I would expect him to be thinking about is trying to push this pawn, because he's probably realizing now that it's not just my pawn on f7 that holds things together, but it's also this knight on e5 that's protecting my g6 square, the knight on g6. However, he really can't push this pawn because I can just take back and then I'm threatening that knight. So honestly, I don't know what he does here. I think he may be realizing that his attack is beginning to run out of steam, and I'm kind of expecting to see an attempt at a rook lift. So he may be bringing that rook over, trying to bring it into the attack. But his pieces are getting very tight, shall we say. Now, my plans, what I'm thinking of here essentially is I can bring this rook over so that when I do take this knight, he's going to actually be forced to take with the queen rather than with this rook, because I'll be threatening that queen at the same time, basically a revealed threat at the same time I take that knight. And then I'll just take that queen back with my queen, because I'm up material. I'm up a whole piece at this point, because he essentially just sacrificed his bishop. And so that's one of the things, oftentimes I'm on the other end of things where I'm the one attacking and I give up a bunch of material. And at the end of it, there's not much to show for it. So that's one of the things I'm trying to get better about, is to ensure that you've got a very good attack. Okay, so my opponent just resigned. I think he ran out of ideas. So that, yeah, it's interesting. A lot of times that's actually a good way to win a game. I'm going to run this through analysis. So I'll wait for the computer to get all that done. So, okay. I've got my analysis over on the side. You can't see all the analysis. I think I can actually bring it over momentarily. So you can see I actually had 95% accuracy. That's pretty darn good. And my opponent, a little over 70% accuracy. So I'm very pleased actually with how things turned out. I think there's something to stopping and pausing and kind of thinking through all of your moves, at least in this game, seemed to help me out. And at first I thought it was going to be a distraction or a problem. However, it turns out that it seems to really have helped, at least in this particular game. I know there was a couple of moves that I made that I probably wouldn't have made if I didn't stop and really articulate what my thoughts were. So again, and that's actually part of this exercise, is being able to articulate thoughts to make them very precise. That's another problem I notice in my chess development, is that oftentimes I have relatively cloudy ideas, and at the end of that, I often say, oh, just the heck with it, I'm going to do this. But that's probably not good enough ultimately. Okay, so the computer's showing we've got some book moves here. Now, this was deviation from theory. You would have expected d4, just like the computer's indicating. It's a standard way of combating any Sicilian. And, okay, so just standard development. You can see the computer's still evaluating. The position is basically equal. Okay, so this is where things start getting a little bit spicy. This is where the first threat happens, and we back off the bishop. Computer likes the move there. Now, again, you would think that he would just back up his bishop, but I believe my opponent came into this game thinking he was going to be aggressive, or maybe they're just an aggressive player. And it almost paid off for them. However, because I just maintained my cool and made sure that I made good moves, it didn't work out. Okay, so you can see already the evaluation bar is showing like more than 3 pawns in black's favor. However, it's kind of a scary threat. So computer likes that move, which is cool. And of course, we expected that queen move to h5. And this is the move that I didn't think that I might have made unless I actually sat here and talked through it. King to g7. One of the temptations of relatively new players is to try to resolve the tension as quickly as possible. However, I could see that taking that piece, I was going to get put in check. I'd have to move out of the way. Then there was a rook lift coming that I was going to have to defend against. And I do think that there are ways for me to do it. I could bring this knight over. I could bring the other knight over to help out. And then my queen would be freed up when the e7 knight comes over to g6. However, I just didn't want to be that far on my back heels, so to speak. So making what seems to me to look like a risky move of actually bringing my king out to defend the bishop is kind of an atypical move for me. But I did it because I sat here, talked about it, I thought through the issue, and then I finally came up with that as a solution. So then we do see the rook lift coming. Computer wants me to take the knight, but I wanted to just kind of defend, block my position up a bit more. And you can see that it's still heavily in my favor. It still wants me to take. However, I like the decision I made to bring my knight over to help out, both to threaten this bishop as well as to protect this space that could come under fire if I ever had to give up my pawn on f7. So my opponent, again, in a very much aggressive attacking style, which in this case I don't think was warranted, sacrifices the bishop by taking on e6. And I take back, and wow, that's the end of the game. It's actually a very short game for as much time was ticked off the clock. I was happy that I didn't make any major blunders. So you can see the evaluation here. It started a very minor way for white, which is kind of how a standard game starts. And then I got a little bit of advantage, and then basically you can see that his attack just fizzled. He had nothing, and ultimately he threw in the towel. So anyway, guys, that's the first, I hope, of many more to come. And hope you enjoyed the video. If you have questions or you have advice for me, that's one of the reasons I'm on here too, is to hear your advice on improving in chess. And I've got a lot more stuff in mind, but that'll all have to come later. So again, thanks, and we'll see you guys later.